this conversation. I have political risk analyst Dismas Mukua, and I'm also joined by political analysts Hezbon Owila and Mutinda Kavembe. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on Kivumbi 2017. Let me begin by posing that same question to you as our viewers bring in their thoughts. Dismas, do you feel that, in that 10-week period, that issues key to Kenyans were adequately prioritized?
Yeah, they were, because the major issue affecting Kenyans today is the cost of living, and that was addressed largely by NASA when they spoke about the cost of unga. And the cost of unga really does not just mean the cost of cooking flour. It means the entire cost of having a meal on your table. So that's a major issue that Kenyans are bothered with. And then, of course, the issue of corruption. Again, that was largely addressed by NASA. And again, corruption and the cost of living, there's a dotted link. And then Kenyans also want to join the league of, the first world. They want to get top-of-the-range infrastructure. And that was addressed by Jubilee. So the major issues that are really bother and affect Kenyans were addressed. But none of the political parties went the extra mile to tell us how they're going to sort it out. Like, for instance, when you look at Jubilee, and when you look at the manifesto, President Kenyatta and his deputy, they've been talking about the development agenda. For them, that's priority, and especially investing in the infrastructure projects. They were not able to tell us how these huge projects, like, for instance, SGR, converts to reducing the cost of living in Kenya or increasing the disposable incomes. And on the same note, NASA was really not able to tell us how the corruption, especially under the Jubilee administration, how it has actually affected our cost of living. And if they're given the opportunity to lead the nation, how they're going to be sorting it out. So all of them tiptoed around these general issues without breaking it down, but they raised the awareness. So maybe now the challenge is, given the fact that all the Kenyans have been given the information, when they go to cast their ballot in a day's time, how will they do it? Do they believe that when a President Kenyatta says, for instance, I'm going to work on creating 6.3 million jobs in the next 5 years, can they believe him, given the fact that he's had 5 years and he's not been able to do that? He also says that he's going to grow the economy. You remember, during the last time when they were campaigning, they promised Kenya double-digit growth. This time around, if you notice, through the 10-week period, nobody in Jubilee spoke about the economy, double-digit growth. They did not even address the core issues affecting Kenya, especially insecurity. But on the other hand, NASA were very key on the messaging. For them, I think the campaign was anchored on chapter 6 on the issue of integrity, saying that the public servants in Kenya have been a major letdown. And then they zoomed in. Most of their time, they were talking on inclusivity. That's Article 10 of the Constitution, where they said that the Jubilee administration, with a lot of success, has been able to empower members of 2 communities, and not really the entire community. They were saying that it's family and friends. Because they said that, say, if you come from the Kalenjin community, it's not necessarily the case that you've been a beneficiary of the Jubilee administration simply because the deputy president comes from that community. From the region, all right. Yeah, it has to be family and friends. So that's the message they've been driving.
All right, and we'll get to that. But Kavembe, in your view, do you feel that these issues have been adequately addressed, or have they been tiptoed over, as Dismas seems to say?
Yeah, I think the issues were captured well, and the issues are the ones that resonate with Kenyans. That's why at some point parties were accusing each other of stealing each other manifestos. That already is evidence enough that they tried as much as possible to address the issues that are affecting Kenyans, to a point that some felt that they probably were stealing. But it is not that anybody was stealing, it's just that the issues that affect Kenyans are the same. And somehow it was inevitable that they both had to address the same issues.
Right.
There was the issue of unemployment, there was the issue of education. Both of them have promised that they are going to provide free secondary education, some in September, some in January. There is the issue of health. Both have tried to explain how they are going to make sure that the public health system is well strengthened. There is the issue of digitalization of learning. The NASA is for having labs, computer labs in every school. Jubilee is for, which is already on the rollout stage, piloting, that is the tablet. So basically, they tried as much as possible to capture the issues. Infrastructure, actually that has been the flagship thing with the Jubilee. That's what they've run away with. And NASA also has come up actually sometimes to even claim credit for some of the things that Jubilee has done. This is simply because some of these things were resonating with the people, and there was no way they were going to avoid addressing them, as even at the risk of looking like they are copying each other. It was just unavoidable.
Right.
Yes.
Owila, both parties have been lauded very well in terms of, drafting great manifestos and even presenting those great manifestos, capturing these issues that Kenyans would want to see addressed. But just drawing from what Dismas said, are Kenyans at that point where they can now say, here's what Jubilee is promising, but they've been in power for the past 5 years. Have they achieved what they first promised to do 5 years ago? And here's what NASA is promising. I mean, some of these people have been, sitting elected members of parliament, in elective positions. What have they been able to do for us? Is the Kenyan electorate at that point just yet?
I think to some extent, I would say that the Kenyan electorate is basically very critical. It's at that point where they are questioning a lot of things, they're interrogating staff. And you'd picture what Jubilee has been doing as a reaction to the fact that the electorate is a lot more conscious. Because apart from the manifesto, and of course, both sides of the divide have actually articulated issues that Kenyans want articulated: health for both sides, education, infrastructure, of course, corruption, that Dismas is saying NASA has not articulated how they're going to do. But I think they did that very well by telling us that they'll have a NASA code of conduct, that anyone who has done business, who is in government cannot do business with the government. But then to come back to your question, I think to a large extent you realize that towards the end, they realize that because Kenyans are a lot more conscious, we would better stick to what will put our best foot forward. And I think Jubilee has done that, because it reached a point where President Uhuru Kenyatta was not talking about what they've done, but was talking about what they've done and how they're going to enhance it. A good example is the maternal health, the free maternal health. It reached a point where he was not just saying that we've given Kenyans this. Mothers have been going to hospital and giving birth safely to babies, and that is a track record. No, he went a step further and said that going forward, any mother in Kenya who gives birth will be given an NHIF card for 1 year. And I think that is a realization, that it is not so much about the manifesto, about what you've done. It's a question of how are you going to be better going forward. NASA has also done that, because you look at what they have in health, especially to counter that. They're talking about, we are not just going to give you free health, but you're going to ensure that the way we are going to structure the health sector is such that the government will pay for you for making a choice to the hospital that you're going to go to. In which case, that payment will be paid on that hospital, making it itself attractive for you as a sick person, which I think, for me, is a realization that the audience is not just interested in freebies, they're looking at quality at the same time. The same thing with health. It has become a big thing for them, because not health, education, because both of them were saying that we originated with this idea. And you see, there is a differentiation in how they are going to go about it, up to the point where now Jubilee is saying that it is practically impossible to get into government, and by September you have free high school education, which I think is basically speaking to the fact that the electorate is a lot more conscious, wants to hold the political class accountable, which is a very bright space to be going to.
Right, and I want us to get into the final pitch, because yesterday we saw both NASA and Jubilee have their final rallies. But before we get to that, just yesterday, Kenyans woke up to news that one of NASA's tallying centers was raided. That is on Friday evening. And of course, this has turned out to be quite a mysterious event, because, hours after that incident was reported, the scene was not cordoned off by police. There was no police officers at the area, and it's seemingly a scene that is still open to the public. Now, NASA has come out and said, you guys, we told you the military is being used and the police are being used to rig this election, and here is proof. This is one of the incidences that we were talking about, Dismas. Less than 48 hours to the election, and we're having such issues come up, just throwing doubt into the confidence Kenyans have in the police service and in the security service at large. How is this likely to affect the election?
Well, the tragedy we have in Africa, especially the African nations, there is a thin line between the administration and the political party running the day. Like, for instance, in Kenya today, as we speak, you are unable to tell where Jubilee as a political party is and where Jubilee administration is. So incumbents all over Africa, they want to use the state machinery and state resources to give them an upper hand. That's why Raila Odinga has been complaining that in Jubilee, the public servants, especially the political appointees, all of them have been very active in their political campaign. And the only time President Kenyatta responded is when he went to Makueni and he said that the local provincial administration, the local chiefs were campaigning for NASA. That's the only time he got a taste of his own medicine.
Right.
Now, coming to the allegations that, in fact, NASA was raided by state operatives, there's actually no evidence to prove that, in fact, it's state operatives who went to the NASA tallying center and raided it. But in the absence of information from the Inspector General to exonerate himself, it's very easy for the members of the public to come to that conclusion that, in fact, these were state operatives. And, NASA was in a hurry to go and, show around people that our tallying center has been invaded. And it's not unusual to have incumbents using state resources. I mean, you would recall what happened in the U.S. with Richard Nixon and Watergate. If you're an incumbent, you want to know what the opposition is doing or what your competition is doing. And because you've got all the state resources at your disposal, it's very easy to do that. And it may just be the case that probably the top leadership of the political party is not aware. But you've got some overzealous public servants who want to do that. For instance, James Orengo said yesterday, a number of their friends, 2 Ghanaians, who were supposed to come and assist them, manage a tallying center, they were deported. And then 1 American and 1 Canadian, they were deported without explanation, which, in as much as Jubilee wants to win this election, they must be very careful on how they manage international relations. Because, for the Americans, they're very keen that you step on the toes of 1 American and they register offense. And the same happens with the Canadians. So it would be important for somebody from maybe the Inspector General of Police to actually come and shed light and clear any doubts. Because in the absence of that, NASA is going to be making so much mileage out of that. And, they were saying that now Jubilee should stop panicking. And what they attacked was one of our many tallying centers. And, it would be naive for NASA to just have only one tallying center known to everybody. But you see, the NASA supporters are happy that the party leader indicated that there's another tallying center in the clouds that maybe the Jubilee administration may not be able to access. And also, this one closely relates to the assassination of Chris Musando. Again, we have been told that it's an assassination because nobody has proved to the contrary that it's not. And all now this goes to the key one key revolution at IBC, that this election is anchored on ICT. And anybody with a very solid ICT policy is the one who is going to win. Michelle, it's very surprising that in other economies, in other countries, there's no electronic voting in most mature democracies. There's no electronic voting in America, doesn't exist in Israel, doesn't exist in the UK. But because in Africa, when you get power, you want to stick there, and you want to do anything at all costs. That's why you've introduced the ICT. So the exit of Musando has given NASA some political capital. Because now people are saying, we've been able to cover all the loopholes. Now you want to assassinate or eliminate this guy who is coming up with a bulletproof system. And we must give IBC a pat on the back, that after the fellow was killed or assassinated, a few days later, they actually came and displayed a system. There was a simulation, and which is very important because, IBC in the past has been accused on not creating systems. Now, people have got a very high confidence that, in fact, you have got systems which will work with or without key personalities. Right.
And we'll focus on IBC in just a moment. But Owila, in terms of the allegations, the claims that have come out from the raiding of NASA's tallying center, we've now seen James Orengo come out and actually name 5 police officers, who he says were part of the 15 men who raided their tallying center. Again, casting more doubt as to the integrity of the police service, as to the integrity of our military as well. What do you make of this entire situation?
Well, I don't think it's such a big thing in terms of casting doubts on the police administration and our security system, but I think it's a preamble of a situation where NASA and all the bigwigs in NASA want to ensure that there is no mischief. So you just deal with everything and mitigate any kind of mischief that you can before the election. It's unfortunate that, the public outside there does not really get to interrogate some of these things.
Right.
But you want to ask yourself, why is it such a big thing, and yet the security agencies are not responding? You know, and I think it's because, to a large extent, they're looking at it as something that if they come out big and respond to, they'll come out like they are culpable, you know. And from where I sit, I want to believe that this is part of the electioneering period, that you want to get the best out of this period, you want to get the best out of any other voter who is yet to decide where they are going. And, you know, by creating the impression that, you know, this is a regime that is out, you know, to finish any kind of competition, you're basically giving yourself some mileage. I've met a couple of friends who, because of the incidents that have happened in the last few weeks, you know, the death of the ICT manager, you know, the attack on NASA yesterday, now they have this resolve that now we have to get out and vote, you know. And you get a sense that this is basically what NASA is doing. They're not leaving anything to chance. Where they are seeing anything that is suspicious, they are flooding it with enough light just to illuminate it and ensure that if there was anyone who was up to some mischief, they just back off. And I think it's working for them. You know, well, it's unfortunate because from where I see it, and my background in journalism and communication, I think it's unfortunate for our news information system because we are putting ourselves in a situation that will take us to a very dark place because everyone right now is beginning to doubt even the credible sources of news because you ask yourself, is it credible, is it manufactured?
Right.
Why is it that there is no authority that is responding to it? There is no live footage. You know, why is it that it is originating from the person who is aggressed? You know, why is the aggressor not responding? And, you know, it becomes a very precarious situation to find yourself as a consumer of news because then even the credible news sources now have to compete with the incredible news sources.
Right.
And you put yourself in a situation where any other news item, people are asking, you know, is it from Jubilee, is it from NASA, which is very unfortunate.
All right, Kivumbi, what do you make of this entire situation? Of course, it is just a few hours to the election. NASA have come out and said even their foreign officials were supposed to aid them in their tallying centers were turned away, and of course they're pointing a finger at the Jubilee government.
You know, I want to pick where he stopped because now that is also my concern. Because even as an ordinary Mwananchi, I've been wondering now where is the truth? Did this attack really take place, or is it something that is stage managed so that it can have a certain reaction from the electorate?
Right.
Because, you know, Kenyans ordinarily are good people and they want things to be done the right way. So when you play victim, you're likely to get some sympathy from those people who don't believe that there should be foul play in this kind of competition. And it has been very difficult to really establish the truth about that because the Jubilee side, and for good reason, is of the opinion that this was self-inflicted,
right.
that it was stage managed so that it helps to cement the narrative that we are dealing with people who are not straightforward and people who are ready to do anything to ensure that they retain power, so that that can have some certain reaction from the masses. And for that, then it becomes very difficult to really give your opinion on, because let me say that if actually such an attack took place, it is very wrong. Because Kenya is a free country and things need to be done above board.
Right.
And in case no state organ was involved, then like Owila correctly says, then the relevant authorities should be coming out and telling us what their position is regarding the matter. But that has not, the truth is the casualty in this matter. And I hope, personally, I hope that it is not politics, because it is very dangerous politics. You know, there has been a narrative that initially targeted IEBC, then later it stopped targeting IEBC and started targeting the KDF and the police. And that narrative is geared towards making Kenyans have this kind of feeling that there are people who are determined to even subvert their will. And that can work well for politically, that can benefit some people. And I believe that probably might be the motive behind the pushing of this narrative to the extent that it has been pushed.
All right, Mutinda Kivumbi, Hezbon Owila and Dismas Mokwa, our analysts this morning.